All right, welcome to this explainer. Today we are diving into something pretty much all of us have dealt with at some point. I'm talking about that dreaded middle of the night anxiety. You know the kind. We're going to look at some fascinating source material that helps us actually reclaim our rest by separating all that modern, spooky folklore from actual scriptural context. Because it turns out, the true source of those 3 a.m. wake-ups, yeah, it might not be what you think at all. Let's get right into it. So have you ever found yourself suddenly wide awake at exactly 3 a.m.? Your heart is just pounding and you've got this heavy sense of dread that you literally just can't put into words? The source material starts by validating this deeply relatable experience. I mean, if you felt this, you are definitely not alone. Now, while science usually points to biological sleep disruptions or general anxiety, the text we're exploring today goes way deeper. It looks at the spiritual interpretations that a lot of people attach to this specific hour, and its main goal is to firmly separate fact from fiction. Okay, let's start by totally busting a major historical misconception. It is absolutely fascinating to discover that associating 3 a.m. with spiritual darkness, the classic witching hour we hear so much about, actually comes from much later folklore. It doesn't come from the Bible itself. It's really just a cultural myth that snowballed over centuries. Basically, it started as a dark, mocking inversion of 3 p.m., which is the traditional hour of Christ's death. So essentially, this whole idea of a 3 a.m. demonic witching hour is entirely separate from the original scriptural texts. Honestly, it's kind of like being afraid of the monster under the bed, but, for adults. To build on that, the source material hammers home a really foundational fact. When the Bible talks about midnight, it literally just means the middle of the night. Exactly 12 a.m. It definitely does not mean 3 a.m. And by defining this so clearly, the text completely strips away all those mystical, spooky superstitions we've accidentally glued onto the 3 a.m. hour. Think about it. If we walk around believing 3 a.m. is this officially designated hour of spiritual darkness, we're actually just buying into centuries-old superstitions, not what the foundational texts actually say. And Psalm 119, verse 62 brilliantly illustrates this point. It says, "At midnight I will rise to give thanks." Now, our source notes that this verse gets brought up a lot, and completely incorrectly, by the way, to back up the idea of some big 3 a.m. spiritual battle. But if you look closely at the actual words, first off, it explicitly says midnight, and second, this was a totally voluntary act of devotion. It wasn't a demonic attack. The psalmist wasn't jolting awake because a demon was coming after him at a specific time. He was purposefully getting up to show gratitude. Plain and simple. It's about personal devotion, not some spooky time on the clock. Now, what's really interesting here is how the text separates these modern metaphors from actual doctrine. There's a super popular modern teaching out there that claims the enemy specifically targets 3 a.m. to attack your rest, like he's trying to steal your authority for the next day. But the source critically examines this and finds absolutely zero biblical support. I mean, scripture never says Satan punches a time clock or has some designated shift schedule for attacks. That is 100% a modern theological interpretation. When we hold that up against actual doctrine, we see a drastically different picture of who truly holds the power over the night. And that crucial truth is captured perfectly right here in Psalm 121, verse 4. "He that keepeth Israel shall neither slumber nor sleep." The source makes a fantastic argument here. If we actually believe God's power is somehow challenged or limited because the clock happens to say 3 a.m., we are completely missing his sovereignty. God is just as present at 3 a.m. as he is at high noon. So, waking up with dread? Sure, that might be a biological disruption, or maybe just general anxiety, but it is unequivocally not because the clock simply struck 3. So what does this all mean for us? How do we build a framework to actually defend our peace? Well, the source material outlines what it calls the KJV arsenal. I like to think of this as a super practical, text-based toolkit. And the best part, it works during literally any dark hour, whether it's midnight, 3 a.m., or even if you're just taking a really stressful nap at 2 p.m. The whole goal here is to shift your focus away from being terrified of whatever time is glowing on your alarm clock and instead empower you to use specific texts to reclaim your peace of mind the second your sleep gets interrupted. This arsenal is packed with some incredible tools. For instance, Psalm 91:5 helps overcome the general terror by night. And notice it says a general night, not a specific hour. Then there's Proverbs 3:24, which offers this really beautiful promise for sweet sleep every single time you lie down. And 2 Timothy 1:7 is used to claim a sound mind over fear. But according to the source, the real game changer here is Romans 10:17, actually speaking these verses out loud. Hearing the words reinforces your faith. It gives you a highly tangible way to exercise your spiritual authority, instead of relying on modern, non-biblical concepts like exercising some invisible obedience muscle.
Taking the specific verses, the source synthesizes them into a really actionable routine called the nighttime peace protocol. So here's your biblically grounded defense for whenever fear strikes, completely independent of whatever time the clock shows. Step 1 is super simple. Acknowledge, don't ignore. Based on Psalm 34:4, the text actually advises against suppressing that 3 a.m. adrenaline spike. Instead, you name the fear. You acknowledge that it isn't bringing you peace, and you address it head-on with textual principles, rather than just spiraling into a superstitious panic.
Now, I found step 2 really eye-opening. The source uses James 4:7, resist the devil and he will flee from you. In the context of this protocol, the text explains that resistance isn't just lying there frozen in bed, crossing your fingers and trying to think positive thoughts. It means tangibly, physically activating the word. Turn on a lamp, open a book, or pull up an app on your phone to engage directly with the truth of the text. It's a totally proactive physical choice to shift your focus away from your racing heart and onto the grounding nature of the scripture. And finally, step 3 centers on 1 Thessalonians 5:18. In everything give thanks. The source calls this the gratitude pivot. And the text is really careful to clear up a common modern misconception here. Praise isn't some magical, biological force field that automatically repels darkness. Instead, gratitude is a powerful pivot because it actively exalts God's sovereignty over your current circumstances. And yes, that includes your sudden sleeplessness. Giving thanks just completely refocuses and resets your mind. Ultimately, the big takeaway from our source material today is just incredibly freeing. Spiritual authority and divine protection are never, ever limited by the hands on a clock. The principles are exactly the same at midnight, 3 a.m., or 3 p.m. So, I want to leave you with this final empowering thought, derived directly from the text we explored in this explainer. Since God never sleeps, and your authority covers absolutely all hours, how are you going to use this protocol to reclaim your rest tonight? Are you going to let go of the folklore, or will you let the clock dictate your peace?